The United States in World War II by Gabriel Ramirez and Nelson Mojica.
Is this comics?
Second World War had begun in September of 1939 after Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany and led the Nazi Party to invade Poland. Hitler was born in Austria, but after fighting in the First World War, he became a radical German nationalist who led the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party for short, to power in the 1920s and eventually became the dictator in 1933. Hitler was a totalitarian leader, meaning that the government, with him at its head, had control of all aspects of its citizens' lives. He, along with Benito Mussolini in Italy and Hideki Tojo in Japan, were the leaders of the Axis powers. To take over Poland, Germany had used a newly developed military tactic called Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, in which they completely mobilized their army in order to make quick work of Poland. Shocked by this, both Great Britain and France declared war on Germany. However, they did very little to stop them from continuing to seize land. By 1940, Germany occupied Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and even France. Britain, now forced to retreat at the French beaches at Dunkirk, was all alone in fighting off the German forces. In June of 1940, we saw the Battle of Britain take place, in which the Royal British Air Force had to fend off from the invading Luftwaffe, or German Air Force. Despite suffering very heavy collateral damage, Britain, however, did come out successful in defending themselves from the German Air Force. Now having suffered a loss in the West, Hitler regathered his forces and in June of 1941 launched Operation Barbarossa, where he invaded the Soviet Union. And while this did violate a non-aggression pact made by Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler in earlier years, it came as no surprise. The Soviets were pushed back deep into Russia, Germany claiming many of its cities. But at the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942, the USSR was able to hold off German forces. And while all of this went on in the Eastern Theater, meanwhile in the Pacific Theater, we saw the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on December 7th of 1941. This aggression on US forces caused the US to declare war on Japan, effectively entering World War II. Leader of the military and President of the United States at the time, Franklin D. Roosevelt, then deployed U.S. troops in both the European and Pacific theater, pushing back Hitler's forces in Germany even more and retaliating against the Japanese in the Pacific. Beginning with the landing of U.S. troops on Normandy beaches on June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, the Allies pushed Nazi forces back into Germany. Eventually, Hitler and his wife in his secret bunker were found having killed themselves. And now, all that was left for the US to do was to deal with the Japanese forces in the Pacific theater.
The World War II was pretty much over. Many conferences were held by the Big Three, who were the United States, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain. And in one conference, also known as the Yalta Conference, they decided that Germany would be divided into 4 different sections by the big nations of the world. And also during the conference, they decided that they should create the United Nations in order to keep peace all around the world. Although it seemed like the war was over, Japan kept on fighting. Japan was ruthless. They decided that they didn't want to give up and kept fighting and didn't give up to the Americans. So the Potsdam Conference was held, in which Japan was warned to surrender or else they would be destroyed by the big nations of the world. Hideki Tojo, who was Japan's leader for all of World War II, decided that Japan would keep fighting the Americans off and stay in the war and not surrender. But this came at a cost, because back at home, the Manhattan Project was taking effect, and the Americans were doing American things by building huge weapons from this. Since Japan decided not to surrender, the first atomic bomb was dropped on August 6, 1945 on Hiroshima. But surprisingly, this didn't stop them. They kept on fighting. So on August 9th, Nagasaki was then bombed. Americans all over America were celebrating this grand victory, except for Japanese Americans, because they were sent by the government into internment camps by Executive Order 9066. This was mainly because Americans, especially government officials, feared for Japanese Americans rebelling or trying something because of the conflict they were having with Japan. Executive Order 9066 forced these Japanese Americans to leave everything behind and be forced into these camps, including leaving their houses, businesses, and other close possessions. With America finally finished with war, the United States got to experience a great period of time in which they had a booming economy and had the most power in the world, politically and economically. But then came the Cold War, which was not really a war, but just a battle between the USSR and the United States in technology and superiority all around the world. The Cold War included the arms race and space race, in which the two countries had battled it out in technology and weapons. For example, Russia beat the United States on being the first satellite to be launched in space by launching a Sputnik, and they had also battled it out on seeing who can hold the most nuclear warheads in the world.